I'm Alina Vance, 30 years old, and I built a multi-million-dollar shipping empire from the ashes of my late husband's debt. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of my corner office, looking down at the city I had conquered. The afternoon sun reflected off the glass towers of the financial district, but I didn't feel the warmth. I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of survival. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. Immaculate tailored suit, hair pulled back in a severe, commanding bun. Eyes that had forgotten how to cry 3 years ago when I buried my husband, Richard. I took a sip of my espresso, the bitter taste grounding me. I had just finalized the acquisition of the Port Authority logistics contract. It was the deal of the decade. It was going to secure the family legacy for generations, or so I thought. The heavy oak doors behind me flew open. There was no knock. My assistant, Sarah, didn't buzz anyone in. I turned slowly, ready to dress down whoever dared to interrupt my moment of victory. "Julian?" I asked, my brow furrowing. My stepson stood in the doorway. I had raised him since he was 10 years old. I had paid off his gambling debts. I had kept his name out of the tabloids. I had saved his father's company when everyone said it was impossible. He was wearing the charcoal suit I bought him for his 25th birthday last month. But he wasn't smiling. His face was a mask of cold, jagged ice. "We need to talk, Alina," he said. His voice was too smooth. It lacked the nervous tremor he usually had when asking for money. "You can't just barge in here, Julian. I'm in the middle of a workday," I said, setting my cup down on the mahogany desk. "You're done working," he replied. He stepped aside. Two men walked into the room. They were massive. They took up all the air in the room. They weren't wearing business suits. They were wearing white. Clinical white. Pristine, terrifying uniforms that screamed institution. My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. "Who are these men?" I demanded, my voice rising. I reached for the phone on my desk. "Security." Julian moved faster than I had ever seen him move. He slammed his hand down on the receiver, cutting off the line. He tossed a thick manila envelope onto the desk. It slid across the polished wood and stopped inches from my fingers. "Read it," he said. I looked down. The words swam before my eyes, but the bold print stood out like a brand. Order of involuntary commitment. Power of attorney. Mentally incapacitated. My blood ran cold. "This is a joke," I whispered. I looked up at him, searching for the punchline. "I am the CEO of this company. I just closed a billion-dollar merger. I am not incapacitated." "You've been under a lot of stress, Alina," Julian said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "Erratic behavior, paranoia. Violent outbursts, the grieving widow who just couldn't cope." "I am not paranoid," I shouted. "See," he said, nodding to the men in white. "Agitation." One of the orderlies stepped forward. "Ma'am, please come with us quietly. We have a sedative if you resist." I backed away until my spine hit the cold glass of the window. "You can't do this. I'm 30 years old. I'm healthy." Then I heard the clicking, the sharp, rhythmic sound of stilettos on marble. Clara walked in. She was Julian's executive assistant. She was also the woman he had been sleeping with in the company penthouse. She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. A slow, venomous smile spread across her face. And then I saw it. My breath hitched in my throat. It felt like someone had punched me in the solar plexus. Around her neck, catching the light, was the sapphire star, my necklace. The one Richard gave me on our first anniversary. The one I kept in a biometric safe in the wall of this very office. "That's mine," I choked out. My hand started to shake, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it tasted like copper. Clara touched the diamond pendant, feigning innocence. "Oh, this old thing," she laughed. "Julian thought it was too heavy for you. He thought it would look better on the new management." You thief, I screamed. I lunged toward her. It was instinct. It was exactly what they wanted. Restrain her, Julian barked. The first guard grabbed my arm. His grip was like a vice. I felt my skin twist under his fingers. Get off me, I yelled. I kicked out, my heel connecting with the guard's shin. He didn't even flinch. The second guard grabbed my other arm. They hauled me back, lifting me off my feet. My shoes scraped uselessly against the plush carpet. Julian, stop this, I begged, the dignity stripping away with every second. I'm your mother, I raised you. Julian walked up to me. He was close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. He adjusted his cufflinks, looking bored. You're not my mother, Alina, he whispered. You're just the gold digger who stole my inheritance, and now I'm taking it back. He nodded to the guards. Take her to the facility, make sure she stays there. They dragged me toward the door. My shoulders felt like they were being dislocated. I looked at my employees in the outer office. Faces I knew, people whose families I supported. They all looked down. They typed on their keyboards. They shuffled papers. Cowards, all of them. I was dragged into the elevator. The doors began to slide shut. The last thing I saw was Clara. She walked behind my desk. She sat in my leather chair. She spun it around to face me, stroking the sapphire at her throat. She winked. The metal doors slammed shut, sealing me in with the monsters. The elevator plummeted. My ears popped. I wasn't Alina Vance, the CEO, anymore. I was a patient. I was a prisoner. And as the darkness of the shaft swallowed me, I realized this wasn't just a takeover. It was an execution. The tires crunched over loose gravel, a sound that vibrated through the metal floor of the transport van and straight into my bones. I had lost track of time. Maybe it had been an hour since they dragged me from my office. Maybe it had been 3. The sedative they forced into my arm in the elevator had turned my brain into sludge. I tried to lift my head. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My wrists were bound in front of me with heavy-duty zip ties. The plastic bit into my skin, cutting off the circulation to my thumbs. I looked down at my tailored skirt. It was ruined, torn at the hem, stained with dirt from where I had fallen getting into the van. The vehicle slowed to a halt. The engine died. Silence rushed in, heavy and oppressive. I heard the heavy clank of a metal gate sliding shut behind us. We were locked in. The back doors swung open. The light was blinding. I squinted, my eyes watering, trying to adjust to the gray afternoon glare. Rough hands grabbed my biceps. Move it, a voice grunted. I stumbled out, my heels twisting on the uneven ground. I fell to my knees. The sharp rocks dug into my skin, shredding my stockings. I gasped, the pain finally cutting through the fog of the drugs. I looked up. My blood froze in my veins. The facility wasn't a hospital. It was a fortress. A massive gray concrete tomb hidden deep in the mountains. There were no windows on the lower levels. Razor wire glinted along the top of the 20-foot fence. It looked like a place where people went to disappear. A sleek black sedan was parked next to the van. I recognized the license plate. I paid for that car. The driver's door opened. Julian stepped out. He looked immaculate, not a hair out of place. He buttoned his jacket as he walked toward a man in a white lab coat who was waiting by the entrance. Julian, I screamed. My voice was raspy, broken. Julian, look at me. He didn't turn, he didn't even flinch. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the guards. I ran toward him. I had to make him see me. I had to make him remember who I was. I am your mother, I wailed. I saved you, I saved all of you. A guard tackled me from behind. The impact knocked the wind out of me. My face smashed into the dirt. I tasted iron and grit. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard Julian speaking to the doctor. His voice was calm, reasonable. The voice of a concerned son. It's tragic, really, Julian said, handing over a thick file. She has these violent delusions of grandeur. She believes she runs a multinational corporation. I spat dirt out of my mouth and lifted my head. I do run it, I shrieked. Check the public records, check the news. Julian sighed, shaking his head sadly at the doctor. See, she's completely detached from reality. The grief over my father, it broke her mind. The doctor nodded sympathetically. We'll take good care of her, Mr. Vance. High security protocol as requested. No outside contact until she stabilizes. Which could take years, Julian added. He finally looked at me. His eyes were dead. There was no love, no regret, just the cold calculation of a predator who had finally taken down his prey. Goodbye, Alina, he said softly. He turned his back on me. He got back into the sedan. No, I screamed. I fought against the guards. I kicked. I bit. I was a feral animal. Don't leave me here, Julian. She's using you. Clara is using you. The engine purred to life. I watched the car reverse. I watched it turn around. I watched it drive away down the winding mountain road. I watched until the red taillights disappeared around a bend. He left me. He actually left me. Let's go, the guard growled. They hauled me up. They dragged me toward the steel doors. I tried to dig my heels in, but I had no strength left. They pulled me inside. The smell hit me instantly. Industrial cleaner and stale despair. They stripped me of everything, my suit, my watch, my wedding ring, even the hair tie from my bun. They blasted me with cold water. They dressed me in a shapeless gray emotional support smock. I was marched down a long, white hallway, door after door, lock after lock. We reached the end of the corridor, room 402. Inside, the guard said. He shoved me forward. I stumbled into the room. The heavy metal door slammed shut behind me. The lock engaged with a sound like a gunshot. Click thud, I spun around, I pounded on the metal. Let me out, I have rights, I want a lawyer. Silence answered me. I turned to face my new world. It was 10 feet by 10 feet. The walls were padded with beige canvas. The floor was rubber. There was no bed, just a mattress on the floor. There was no window, just a single recessed fluorescent light in the ceiling. It hummed. A low, angry buzz that burrowed into my skull. Bzzzzzzzzzzz. I sank down onto the mattress. I pulled my knees to my chest. I was 30 years old. I was a CEO. I was a widow. And now I was a ghost. I stared at the padded wall until the white canvas blurred. The reality of it crushed me like a physical weight. Nobody knew I was here. Nobody was coming for me. I was buried alive in a concrete box. And the worst part wasn't the fear. It was the humming. That incessant, electric humming. I closed my eyes, but the light burned through my eyelids. Julian had won, for now. I'm Alina Vance, 30 years old, and I used to run a billion-dollar legacy before I became a number on a patient file. Time didn't move in straight lines inside the facility. It pooled in the corners of the room like stagnant water. I counted the days by the pill cups. Blue cup meant morning. Red cup meant night. But there was one rhythm that broke the sterile monotony of my hell. The third Tuesday of every month. I knew it was Tuesday because the heavy steel door didn't just slide open for food. It opened for her. I was sitting on the edge of my mattress. My knees were pulled up to my chest. I was rocking back and forth. It was a habit I had developed to self-soothe. To remind myself that my body could still move, that I was still real. The lock disengaged with a heavy mechanical clunk. My stomach dropped. It was a conditioned response now. Pavlovian fear. The door swung outward. The guard stepped aside, his face hidden behind a riot visor, and then she walked in. Clara, the air in the room changed instantly. It shifted from the smell of bleach and recycled oxygen to something rich, something floral, something mine. She was wearing my signature scent. Jasmine and wild orchid. I inhaled sharply. The smell hit the back of my throat like a physical blow. It triggered a cascade of memories. Getting ready for the gala. kissing my late husband goodbye. Signing the merger documents. It smelled like power. It smelled like the woman I used to be. Hello, Alina, she purred. She didn't sit. She never sat. She treated my cell like a petting zoo exhibit. She stood in the center of the room, turning slowly. She wanted me to see. She wanted me to look. I lifted my head, my neck stiff. My eyes adjusted to the glare of the fluorescent lights reflecting off her. She was wearing pink, not just any pink. It was my vintage Chanel suit. The tweed one with the pearl inlaid buttons. I bought it at an auction in Paris 3 years ago. I had worn it to ring the opening bell at the stock exchange. Now it was draped over the woman who stole my life. Do you like it? She asked, smoothing the skirt over her hips. She plucked at the fabric. It was a little loose in the waist. I had to have the tailor take it in. You were always a bit boxy. My hands curled into fists. My fingernails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the fabric from her body, but I stayed frozen. I knew the consequences of an outburst. The needle, the dark room, the restraint chair. Get out, I rasped. My voice was rusty from disuse. Clara laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound that bounced off the padded walls. Oh, don't be like that, she said. She took a step closer. Her heels clicked sharply on the rubber floor. Click, click, click. I bring you news from the outside world. You should be grateful. She leaned down. Her face was inches from mine. Her skin was glowing. She looked well rested. She looked expensive. I looked down at myself. I was wearing a shapeless gray sack. The fabric was coarse. It rubbed against my skin like sandpaper. My hair was matted. My legs were unshaven. I was a ghost haunting my own body. Julian misses you, she whispered. It was a lie, a cruel, twisted lie designed to see if I would break. He talks about you all the time, she continued, her eyes dancing with malice. He says, Clara, darling, make sure the old hag is comfortable. She stood up straight again, inspecting her manicure. We're redecorating the mansion, by the way. My head snapped up. Don't touch it, I hissed. The library, she mused, ignoring me. It was so gloomy, all that dark mahogany, all those old books. Those were Richard's books, I choked out. We gutted it, she said cheerfully. Turned it into a media room. Julian wanted a bigger screen for his video games. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. They were erasing Richard. They were erasing me. And the garden, she added. Those rose bushes you loved, the prize-winning ones, I stopped breathing. Dug them up, she said. Put in a pool, a nice, modern infinity pool. She checked her watch. It was my Cartier tank watch. The gold glinted under the harsh lights. Oh, look at the time, she sighed. I have a board meeting at 3. She paused for effect. She knew exactly what she was doing. Julian signed over your seat this morning, Alina. The world tilted on its axis. No, I whispered. He can't. He doesn't have the authority. He has power of attorney, she smiled. Because you're incapacitated, because you're insane. She tapped her temple with a manicured finger. The paperwork is bulletproof. I'm the new chairwoman. She leaned in close again. The jasmine perfume was suffocating now. It smelled like funeral flowers. I'm living in your house, she whispered. I'm sleeping in your bed. I'm spending your money. And I'm running your company. And you, she gestured to the 4 padded walls. You are going to rot in here until you forget your own name. She straightened up. She smoothed the lapel of my Chanel suit. Goodbye, Alina. See you next month. She turned on her heel. The guard opened the door. She walked out into the hallway. She didn't look back. The heavy steel door slammed shut. The lock engaged. Click thud. I was alone again. The scent of jasmine lingered in the air. It taunted me. It was a ghost of a life I could no longer touch. I looked down at my shaking hands. I wasn't crying. I was past tears. I was past grief. Something else was taking root in my chest, something cold and hard and sharp. Clara thought she was breaking me. She thought she was coming here to gloat over a corpse. But she made a mistake. She told me they were selling off pieces of the company. She told me Julian was distracted. She told me she was arrogant. I looked at the pill cup on the floor. I hadn't swallowed the blue pill this morning. I had hidden it under my tongue. I spit it into my hand. It was a small, round tablet. I crushed it between my thumb and forefinger. Dust. I wasn't insane. I was patient. I stood up. My legs were shaky, but they held. I walked to the wall. I pressed my ear against the padding. I listened to the hum of the facility. I heard the shift change. I heard the distant rattle of keys. Clara wore my clothes. She stole my life, but she forgot one thing. She forgot that I built that company from the ground up. I knew how to destroy things, and I knew how to rebuild them. 2 years. I had been here 2 years. But today, looking at that vintage Chanel suit, I decided something. I wasn't going to die in here. I was going to get out. And when I did, I wasn't just going to take back my company. I was going to take back my perfume. I was going to take back my name. And I was going to burn their world to the ground. I'm Alina Vance, 30 years old, and I used to run a billion-dollar legacy before I became a number on a patient file. The routine was a slow, suffocating death. It was designed to erase me, to sand down the ridges of my personality until I was as smooth and blank as the padded walls. Morning, the slot in the door slid open. A tray of gray mush, a small paper cup, 2 pills, one pink, one yellow. I called them the erasers. For the first 6 months, I took them. I didn't have a choice. They held me down. They forced my jaw open. The drugs made the world soft. They made the anger quiet. They made me forget why I was screaming. I would lose days. I would sit in the corner and drool onto my shoulder, watching dust motes dance in the fluorescent light. I was a vegetable. I was exactly what Julian wanted me to be. But the human body is resilient, and my rage was stronger than their chemistry. The lock clicked. It was 8:00 a.m. I knew the time by the shift change of the guards outside. Heavy boots meant the day shift. Squeaky sneakers meant the night shift. Nurse Ratched, that's what I called her in my head, stepped in. She was a wall of white starch and indifference. Meds, Alina, she droned. She didn't look at me. To her, I wasn't a person. I was a task. I stood up from the mattress. My movements were slow, deliberate. I had to sell the performance. I shuffled toward her, letting my shoulders slump. I let my eyes go vacant. I reached out a trembling hand. I took the cup. I tossed the pills into my mouth. I threw my head back. I swallowed. My throat bobbed. "Good girl," she muttered. She checked my mouth with a wooden depressor. "Lift your tongue." I lifted it. "Cheeks." I pulled my cheek away from my gum. "Empty." She nodded and turned to leave. The heavy door slammed. The lock engaged. Click thud. I waited 10 seconds. I listened for her footsteps to fade down the hall. Then I bent over the small drain in the corner of the floor. I gagged, I retched, I forced the muscles of my throat to reverse. The pills fell out into my palm. They were slimy. They were half dissolved, but they were out. I crushed them into a paste with my thumb and shoved the residue deep into the rubber seal of the floor drain. I rinsed my mouth with the stale water from my bottle. My head cleared. The fog lifted. The room came into sharp focus. The humming of the light was louder now. The smell of bleach was sharper, but I was me. I wasn't the zombie they thought I was. I was a wolf in a cage. I stripped off the gray sack they made me wear. I stood in my underwear. My body had changed. I was thinner. My ribs showed through my skin. But the softness of the luxury life was gone. I was wire and bone. I dropped to the floor. The rubber was cold against my palms. 1, I whispered. I lowered my chest to the floor. I pushed up. 2, my triceps burned. 3. I pictured Julian's face on the floor beneath me. Every rep was a punch. Every rep was a step toward his throat. 4. I pictured the mistress, Clara, wearing my clothes, sleeping in my bed. 5. The sweat dripped from my nose. It pooled on the rubber. I did this until my arms gave out. until I collapsed, gasping for air, my heart hammering a war drum against my ribs. 500 a day, that was the goal. I was getting close. I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling. My body was exhausted, but my mind was racing. I reached under the mattress. I felt for the loose seam I had picked open with a fingernail months ago. I pulled out my treasure, a single broken crayon, burnt sienna. I had stolen it from the art therapy session they dragged me to once a month. I crawled to the wall behind the mattress. It was the only spot the camera in the ceiling couldn't see. The canvas padding was covered in faint, waxy lines. It looked like scribbles to anyone else. But to me, it was a map. I traced the lines, Vance Global Headquarters. I drew the lobby. I drew the elevator banks. I drew the ventilation shafts on the 40th floor. I closed my eyes and walked the halls in my mind. I remembered the security protocols. I remembered the passcodes. I remembered the hidden safe behind the portrait of my late husband in the boardroom. Julian didn't know about the safe. He didn't know about the contingency fund. He didn't know about the blackmail files I kept on the board members. I pressed the crayon hard against the wall. The wax crumbled under my pressure. I was memorizing my kingdom. I was sharpening my blade. 2 years, 730 days. They thought they were burying me. They thought time would erode me. They were wrong. Time was a crucible. It was burning away the grief. It was burning away the mercy. I looked at the drawing of my office. I traced the desk where I used to sit. "I'm coming," I whispered to the wall. My voice was low, raspy, dangerous. "I'm coming for everything." The light buzzed overhead. Bzzzzzzzzzzz. It didn't annoy me anymore. It sounded like electricity. It sounded like power. I hid the crayon. I pulled the gray sack back over my head. I sat on the mattress and pulled my knees to my chest. I started to rock back and forth. I let my jaw go slack. I waited for the nurse to come back with lunch. I was ready to play the part. But behind my vacant eyes, I was already at war. I'm Alina Vance, 30 years old, and I just bet my entire life on the integrity of a man whose name I barely knew. The hunger was a constant companion. It lived in my belly like a second heartbeat. Thump, thump, empty, empty. It was 2:00 a.m. I knew the time because the ventilation system cycled off for exactly 10 minutes every night at 2. The silence was deafening. It was the only time the buzzing of the lights stopped. It was the only time I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I was sitting against the door. The cold steel pressed against my spine. I was waiting, not for sleep. Sleep was dangerous. I was waiting for the squeak of sneakers. The night shift, heavy boots meant brutality. Sneakers meant apathy, usually. But lately the sneakers had sounded different. Lighter, hesitant. I heard them coming down the hall. Squeak, pause, squeak. They stopped right outside my door. My heart hammered against my ribs. I held my breath. The small meal slot at the bottom of the door slid open. Metal grinding on metal, a screech that set my teeth on edge. A napkin was shoved through. It wasn't mealtime. I stared at the white paper on the gray rubber floor. I didn't move. Was it a trap? Was Nurse Ratched waiting on the other side with a sedative needle? I crawled forward on my hands and knees. I moved like a spider. I reached out a trembling hand. I grabbed the napkin. It was heavy. I unfolded it. Bread. A thick, dense heel of fresh sourdough, and a packet of real butter. My mouth watered so hard it hurt. I looked at the slot. I saw a pair of eyes peering through the narrow gap. Brown eyes, tired eyes. There were dark circles under them that spoke of double shifts and minimum wage. It was the orderly, the one I had watched for 2 weeks. Silas. He wasn't like the others. He didn't laugh when the patient screamed. He didn't twist my arm when he escorted me to the showers. Yesterday, I saw him clench his jaw when the facility director, Dr. Aris, yelled at him for a stain on his uniform. I saw the hatred in his eyes. It was the same hatred that lived in mine. "Eat," a voice whispered through the slot. It was barely audible. before the cameras cycle back on. He knew the camera blind spots. He knew the schedule. I didn't hesitate. I ripped the bread in half. I shoved it into my mouth. It tasted like heaven. It tasted like hope. I swallowed the dry lump without chewing enough. It scraped my throat. It felt good to feel something other than numbness. I crawled closer to the slot. My face was inches from the steel. I could smell him, cheap instant coffee and antiseptic soap. This was the moment. I had to choose, keep playing the vegetable or roll the dice. If I was wrong, he would tell Dr. Eris. They would up my dosage. They would put me in the solitary room with the restraints. I might never wake up again. But if I was right. I swallowed the last crumb. I pressed my lips to the slot. Silas, I whispered. I felt him flinch on the other side of the door. He started to pull back. Wait, I hissed. My voice was rusty from disuse, but it was sharp. It was the voice I used to use in boardrooms. Don't go. You talk, he whispered back. He sounded terrified. They said you were catatonic. They said your brain was mush. They lied, I said. They lie about everything. I paused. I needed to hook him. I needed to find his price. I saw Dr. Eris scream at you yesterday, I said. I saw him dock your pay for being 5 minutes late. Silence on the other side. I pressed harder. He drives a Porsche, I whispered. And you take the bus. Stop it, Silas hissed. You're crazy, I'm leaving. I have $5 million, I said. The words hung in the air between us. The squeak of his sneaker stopped. He didn't walk away. I have $5 million in an account Julian doesn't know about, I continued. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might pass out. It's in the Caymans, account number 774 Bravo X-ray. I recited the code like a prayer. It's clean money, Silas, it's mine. He came back to the slot. I saw his brown eyes again. They were wide. Why are you telling me this? Because I need a partner, I said. And you need a way out of this hellhole just as much as I do. He looked left, he looked right, checking the hallway. What do you want? He asked. His voice trembled. He was hooked. I need a phone, I said. One call, that's it. Impossible, he said. They scan us, metal detectors. Not a phone then, I countered. I was negotiating for my life. Information, I need to know who visits. I need to know Julian's schedule. I need to know when Dr. Eris leaves the building. He stayed silent for a long time. I could hear his breathing, ragged and shallow. If they catch me, if they catch you, you're fired, I said. If you help me, you're retired for life. I reached through the slot. My fingers brushed against the cold metal lip. Silas, look at me. He lowered his head until we were eye to eye. I am not crazy, I said. I am a mother who was stolen from her life. Help me take it back. A beat, 2 beats. The ventilation system hummed back to life. The moment of silence was over. Tuesday, he whispered. Eris leaves early on Tuesdays for golf. The security grid updates at 4:00 p.m. My blood ran hot. Tuesday, I repeated. I'll bring more bread, he said, and paper. He stood up. Don't make me regret this, Alina. You won't, I vowed. He slid the metal cover shut. Click. He walked away. Squeak, squeak, squeak. I slumped back against the padding. I licked the butter from my fingers. I wasn't alone anymore. I had an asset. I had a spy. Julian thought he had buried me in a concrete tomb. But he forgot that seeds grow in the dark. And I had just found my water. I'm Alina Vance, 30 years old, and I just escaped my own grave during a hurricane. The thunder was my cover. It shook the foundation of the facility. It rattled the bars on the windows, and it masked the sound of the magnetic lock disengaging with a soft click. I was standing by the back service door. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. It felt like a trapped bird. Silas stood in the shadows of the hallway. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. His hands were shaking as he gripped his master keycard. If he looked at me, he might lose his nerve. He might remember the consequences. He might remember Dr. Eris's threats, but he didn't stop. He pushed the heavy steel door open just an inch. The wind howled through the crack. It screamed like a banshee. Rain sprayed onto the linoleum floor. It was freezing. It was violent. "Go," Silas whispered. His voice was swallowed by a crack of thunder. "The perimeter sensors are down for 90 seconds. Run." I didn't say thank you. There was no time for gratitude. Gratitude wouldn't save me. Speed would. I pushed through the door and fell into the night. The cold hit me like a physical blow. It sucked the breath right out of my lungs. For 2 years, I had breathed recycled air. Stale, sterile, controlled. This air was wild. It smelled of ozone and wet earth. It smelled of freedom. I didn't have shoes. Silas couldn't get them without raising suspicion. I was barefoot in a thin hospital gown that clung to my skin instantly. I hit the gravel path and almost cried out. Sharp stones dug into my soles, but I didn't stop. I couldn't feel the pain, not really. The adrenaline was a drug. It flooded my veins. It turned my blood into gasoline. I sprinted toward the fence line where the old maintenance gate stood. Silas said he unlocked it. If he lied, this was over. If he lied, I would be tackled by guards in 30 seconds. I saw the gate. It was swaying in the wind, unlocked. I burst through it and hit the tree line. The woods were a nightmare, pitch black, dense. The rain turned the ground into a slurry of mud and rotting leaves. I slipped. My knee slammed into a hidden root. I gasped, tasting mud and iron. I scrambled back up on all fours. I was an animal now. I wasn't a CEO. I wasn't a mother. I was prey running from the predator. I pushed through a thicket of brambles. Thorns grabbed at my gown. They tore at my arms. I felt the sting of 100 tiny cuts. Warm blood mixed with the cold rain on my skin. I didn't care. Let them bleed. Let the pain prove I was alive. I ran blindly, guided only by the flashes of lightning that illuminated the forest in strobe light bursts. 1 mile, my lungs were burning. It felt like I was inhaling glass. My muscles, atrophied from months of lying on a cot, screamed in protest. But I forced them to move. I thought of Julian, my son, my beautiful, treacherous son. I pictured his face the day he signed the commitment papers. He had cried fake crocodile tears. He told the judge it was for my own good. He told them I was a danger to myself. He held his mistress's hand while they dragged me away. That image was my fuel. It burned hotter than the exhaustion. 2 miles. The mud was deeper here. It sucked at my ankles. It tried to pull me down. "No," I hissed into the dark. "You don't get to keep me." I ripped my foot free with a wet suck sound. I kept moving. 3 miles, I saw it. The lightning flashed and a silhouette rose up against the stormy sky, the great oak. It was split down the middle by a lightning strike from a decade ago. It was dead, but it was still standing, just like me. I stumbled toward it. I fell to my knees at the base. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely control them. I clawed at the hollow in the trunk. Rotting wood, spiderwebs, and then plastic. I pulled out the heavy, sealed bag. I ripped it open with my teeth. I didn't care if I swallowed plastic. Inside, dry and safe, was my lifeline, a burner phone, a thick stack of cash. A change of clothes I had stashed 3 years ago when the paranoia first started. When I first noticed Julian whispering in corners, I didn't put on the clothes yet. I grabbed the phone. I pressed the power button. "Please work, please." The screen lit up. Battery icon showed 15%. Enough. It was enough to burn the world down. I slumped against the wet bark of the tree. The rain was still hammering me, but I didn't feel cold anymore. I felt fire. I looked at the phone in my muddy, bloody hand. I dialed a number I had memorized a lifetime ago. It rang once, twice. "This is a secure line," a deep voice answered. "Identify." I closed my eyes. I let the rain wash the mud from my face. "It's Elena," I said. My voice was raspy. Broken, but it was loud. "Activate the Chimera protocol." Silence on the other end, then a sharp intake of breath. Mrs. Vance, my God, we thought you were. I cut him off. I looked back toward the direction of the facility. I couldn't see it through the trees and the rain, but I knew it was there. I knew they were finding my empty bed right now. I knew the alarms were starting to blare. I was dead, I whispered into the phone. I gripped the device until my knuckles turned white. But I got better. I stood up. My legs were trembling, but they held me. Send the car, I commanded. I'm coming to take my company back. And Julian? The voice asked. I looked down at my bare, bleeding feet. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Leave Julian to me. I'm Alina Vance, 30 years old, and I am currently a ghost haunting the edges of an empire I built with my own blood. The neon sign of the diner flickered above me. Buzz, click, buzz. It cast a sickly yellow light onto the wet pavement. I pulled the collar of my oversized hoodie up higher. It smelled like mildew and mothballs. It was part of the stash I had buried years ago, but it was dry. That was all that mattered. I pushed open the heavy glass door. A bell chimed. It sounded too loud, too cheerful. I flinched. Every noise felt like an alarm now. Every set of eyes felt like a security camera. I scanned the room. Vinyl booths with duct tape patches. A waitress counting tips at the counter. And in the furthest corner, shrouded in shadow, him, Marcus, my old general counsel. The man who had helped me navigate my first IPO when I was 22. He looked terrible. His shoulders were slumped. His suit was expensive, but it hung loosely on his frame. He was stirring a cup of black coffee, staring into the vortex of dark liquid like it held the secrets of the universe. Julian had broken him. I could see it from here. My son had buried Marcus under a mountain of non-disclosure agreements and threats. But NDAs don't apply to the dead, and as far as the world knew, I was gone. I walked toward him. My sneakers squeaked on the linoleum. My heart hammered against my ribs. Thump, thump, thump. I slid into the booth opposite him. I didn't say a word. I just sat there. Marcus didn't look up immediately. I told you people, I have nothing left to say, he mumbled. His voice was gravel. I signed the papers, leave me alone. Look at me, Marcus, I whispered. The spoon froze in his hand. It clattered against the ceramic mug, clink. He looked up, his eyes widened. His face went pale, draining of color until he looked like wax. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like he was having a stroke. Alina, he stammered. He reached out a trembling hand as if to touch a phantom. They said you were. Incapacitated, I finished for him. Insane, dangerous. I leaned over the table. I lowered my voice to a hiss. They lied. Tears pooled in his eyes. This man who had stared down federal regulators without blinking was crying. I tried to stop him, Marcus choked out. Julian, he had power of attorney. He had the doctors. I couldn't. I know, I said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the burner phone. My hands were shaking, not from fear, not anymore. They shook with a rage so hot it felt like it was melting my bones. But he got sloppy, Marcus. Arrogance makes you sloppy. I unlocked the phone. I navigated to the secure cloud drive I had accessed 10 minutes ago in the parking lot. The password was the date my father died. Julian didn't know that date. He never cared enough to ask. I shoved the phone across the sticky tabletop. Look at the transfer logs, I commanded. Marcus put on his reading glasses. His hands were shaking worse than mine. He scrolled. He squinted. These are asset transfers, he muttered. The Lush property, the Cayman holdings, the voting shares. Look at the signatures, I said. My voice was tight. It felt like a wire pulled to the breaking point. He used my digital key. Yes, Marcus said, confused. He had power of attorney. Look at the timestamps, Marcus. I slammed my hand on the table. The waitress looked over. I didn't care. September 12th, October 4th, November 1st. Marcus looked at the dates. then he looked at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. September 12th, he whispered. That was the day after the committal hearing. Exactly, I said. I leaned back against the cracked vinyl. The judge ruled that I was mentally incompetent on September 11th. He stripped me of my legal capacity to sign contracts. I pointed a dirty finger at the glowing screen. If I was incompetent, I couldn't authorize the use of that digital key. Marcus's eyes began to dart back and forth. The lawyer was waking up. The shark was smelling blood. And if he used the key himself, Marcus murmured. He acted as an agent for an incapacitated principal without proper court oversight for these specific asset classes, I said. I knew the law, I wrote the bylaws. But it's worse than that, I added. I swiped the screen to the next image, a PDF of a physical document. He forged my physical signature on the bank release forms. Look at the loop on the E. I never loop my E's. Marcus stared, he gasped. He forged them because the bank wouldn't accept the digital key for an international transfer. Fraud, Marcus whispered. The word hung in the air, heavy, sweet. Not just fraud, I said. Grand larceny, identity theft, corporate espionage. I looked Marcus dead in the eye. Everything he did for the last 2 years is void. Every sale, every acquisition, every firing. I took a deep breath. The smell of burnt coffee suddenly smelled like victory. The company isn't his, Marcus. It never was. I grabbed his wrist. My grip was iron. It's still mine. Marcus looked at the phone, then back at me. A spark lit up in his eyes. The fear was gone, replaced by something sharper, hunger. He has the board in his pocket, Marcus warned. He has the police chief on payroll. I don't care, I said. I have the truth and I have you. I squeezed his wrist. You're not retired anymore, counselor. He looked down at his hand. Then he looked at me. He straightened his tie. He squared his shoulders. The broken man vanished. The shark returned. I need a laptop, he said. His voice was steady now. And I need a notary who hates Julian as much as we do. I smiled. It felt foreign on my face. It felt dangerous. I know a guy, I said, but first we need to make a stop. Where? Marcus asked. I looked out the window. The rain was letting up. The storm was passing, but my storm was just beginning. My safe deposit box, I said. Julian took my house. He took my freedom, but he forgot about the contingency fund. I stood up. My legs felt strong. Let's go get my life back. Marcus threw a $20 bill on the table. We walked out into the night. Julian was probably sleeping soundly in my bed right now. He probably thought he had won. He had no idea that the ink on his stolen empire was about to run red. I'm Alina Vance, 30 years old, and tonight I am the ghost returning to burn down the castle. The red silk felt cold against my skin. It was a shade of crimson so deep it looked like fresh arterial blood under the streetlights. I tightened the strap of my heel. Click, it locked into place. I checked my reflection in the tinted window of the black SUV. My hair was slicked back. My makeup was sharp enough to cut glass. The bruises from my escape were covered with thick concealer, but the fire in my eyes was impossible to hide. I didn't look like a victim anymore. I looked like a predator. We are ready, Mrs. Vance, the officer in the front seat said. He didn't look at me. He was checking his tactical watch. The district attorney has the warrant. The units are at the rear exits. Good, I said. My voice was calm, unnaturally calm. Inside my chest was a hurricane. I looked out at the glittering facade of the Grand Hotel. A massive banner draped over the entrance read, Vance Global 50 Years of Excellence. Julian had spared no expense. He was celebrating the anniversary of the company my father built. The company I expanded. The company he stole while I rotted in a damp room with padded walls. I opened the car door. The night air hit me. It smelled of exhaust and expensive perfume. I stepped onto the pavement. My heels struck the concrete like a gavel. Clack, clack, clack. I didn't take the side entrance. I didn't sneak in through the kitchen. I walked straight toward the velvet ropes. The bouncer stepped forward, his hand raised. "Ma'am, this is a private." He stopped. He looked at my face. Then he looked at the four uniformed officers flanking me. He stepped back. He lowered his head. I didn't acknowledge him. I pushed through the revolving doors. The lobby was empty. Everyone was inside the ballroom. I could hear the muffled sound of applause. I could hear Julian's voice booming over the speakers. And though my mother could not be here tonight due to her condition, we honor her legacy. My stomach twisted. Acid rose in my throat. He was talking about me like I was a tragic memory, like I was already in the ground. I walked toward the double mahogany doors of the ballroom. Two waitresses froze with trays of hors d'oeuvres. They stared at me. They recognized me. I put my hand on the brass handle. The metal was cool. I took a deep breath. I filled my lungs with the scent of lilies and champagne. Showtime. I threw the doors open, both of them. They slammed against the walls with a thunderous crash. Boom. The sound echoed through the cavernous hall. 500 heads turned at once. The string quartet screeched to a halt. The applause died instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It pressed against my eardrums. I stepped into the light. The crystal chandeliers dazzled above me, blindingly bright. I walked down the center aisle. The red carpet beneath my feet felt like destiny. I kept my chin high. I didn't look at the board members gaping with their mouths open. I didn't look at the socialites whispering behind their fans. I locked my eyes on the stage. Julian was standing at the podium, my son, the boy I had raised, the monster who had forged my signature and locked me in a cage. He was holding a flute of vintage champagne. He was smiling a second ago. Now his face was a mask of pure terror. His skin turned the color of ash. His eyes bulged. He looked like he was seeing a corpse walking. His hand went slack. The crystal flute slipped from his fingers. It fell in slow motion. I watched it turn in the air. Smash. It shattered on the marble stage. Glass flew everywhere. Champagne splashed onto his Italian leather shoes. The sound rang out like a gunshot. "Mother," he whispered. The microphone picked it up. It amplified his fear for the entire room to hear. You're supposed to be dead." I projected my voice. It was steady. It was steel. Locked away, medicated until I drooled. I stopped 10 feet from the stage. I smoothed the silk of my red dress. It rippled like liquid fire. "I got better, Julian." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone gasped. Julian gripped the podium. "Security," he shrieked. His voice cracked. "Remove her. She's unwell. She's escaped from a facility." "No one is moving, Julian," I said. I smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who has cornered a rabbit. "Look behind me." Julian looked up. He looked past me. Through the open doors, a dozen police officers marched into the room. Their badges glinted under the chandeliers. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Marcus stepped out from behind the wall of blue uniforms. He was holding a thick folder of documents high in the air. "Julian Vance," the lead detective shouted. His voice boomed without a microphone. "You are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and kidnapping." The room erupted. Flashes from cameras started to pop. Click flash, click flash. It was blinding. It was beautiful. Julian staggered back. He knocked over the flower arrangement on the podium. Water spilled over the edge. He looked for an exit. There were none. He looked at his mistress in the front row. She was already backing away, clutching her pearls, pretending she didn't know him. He was alone. I took one more step forward. I wanted him to see my eyes. I wanted him to see that there was no mercy left in them. "You wanted the spotlight, Julian," I whispered. I gestured to the police moving up the stairs toward him. "Now you have it." I'm Alina Vance, 30 years old, and tonight I just turned a $1 billion gala into a crime scene. This is a mistake. Julian screamed. Spittle flew from his mouth, landing on the polished microphone. He pointed a shaking finger at the detective, then swung it wildly toward me. Do you know who I am? I own this city. She's lying. She's the one who's sick. He looked at the crowd, his eyes wide and desperate, begging for an ally. She killed my father. She's projecting her guilt onto me. She's off her meds, the crowd murmured. Doubt ripples through a room faster than fire. Julian was charismatic. He was handsome. He was convincing. For a split second, I saw the board members waver. I saw the hesitation in the eyes of the press. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline in my gut. He was going to try to spin this. He was going to try to commit me again, right here in front of the people who used to call me their boss. I didn't scream back. I didn't argue. I reached into my red silk clutch. My fingers brushed against the cool plastic of the remote control I had swiped from the tech booth 5 minutes ago. I had paid the sound engineer $5,000 cash to look the other way. It was the best investment I'd ever made. You're right, Julian, I said. My voice was amplified by the handheld mic I had snatched. Someone did kill your husband. My husband, your father. Julian froze. But it wasn't me. I pressed the button. Click. The massive LED screens behind the stage flickered. The golden 50 Years of Excellence logo vanished instantly. Static hissed through the massive ballroom speakers. It was loud, jarring. The entire room flinched, hands flying to cover ears. Then the image cleared. It was a video. Grainy, black and white, taken from a hidden nanny cam in the master bedroom. The timestamp in the corner was from 2 years ago. The night my husband died. The night my life ended. The room went deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop on the carpet. On the screen, a woman was standing over a bedside table. She was mixing a white powder into a glass of water. She turned to the camera. Her face was clear. Undeniable, it was Clara, Julian's mistress. The woman currently sitting in the front row, clutching her Chanel bag like a shield. On the screen, she pulled out her phone. She put it to her ear. It's done, Julian, the digital Clara said. Her voice boomed through the ballroom. It echoed off the vaulted ceiling, distorting into a grotesque confession. I gave him the triple dose like you said. His heart won't handle it. By morning, the company is yours. I looked at the real Clara. She let out a strangled cry. It sounded like a wounded animal. She tried to stand up, but her legs gave out. She collapsed back into her chair, her face turning the color of wet cement. Everyone stared at her. The socialites recoiled, pulling their expensive dresses away from her as if she were contagious. No, she whispered. That's a deep fake. But no one was listening to her. Everyone was looking at Julian. Julian turned slowly to look at the screen. He watched himself, or rather, heard his own name implicate him in 4K resolution. His arrogance didn't just break, it evaporated. I watched the blood drain from his face until he looked like a wax figure melting under heat. His knees knocked together, actually knocked. He looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a vase, not a titan of industry. He looked at me, his eyes were wet, pleading. Mom, he mouthed. He tried to play the family card. He tried to appeal to the woman who had welcomed him into her home. But that woman was gone. He had locked her in a dark room and thrown away the key. Don't, I said, my voice was ice. Don't you dare call me that. I pointed at the screen. You didn't just steal my money, Julian. You stole my husband. You killed your own father for a chair in a boardroom. I turned to the detective. Take him. The officers didn't hesitate this time. They swarmed the stage. Julian didn't fight. He went limp. They dragged him down the stairs, his expensive Italian shoes scuffing uselessly against the wood. He was sobbing now. Ugly, heaving sobs that ruined his pristine tuxedo. As they cuffed Clara in the front row, she screamed. She shrieked curses at him, at me, at the world. It was a symphony of chaos, and I was the conductor. The flashbulbs went crazy. A wall of white light blinded me, but I didn't blink. I stood center stage. I looked out at the sea of shocked faces. The board members who had signed my termination papers were trembling. The friends who hadn't visited me for 2 years were looking down at their shoes. They knew. They all knew that the reckoning wasn't over. It was just starting. I felt a vibration in my chest. It wasn't fear, it wasn't grief, it was power, pure, unadulterated power. I looked at Marcus standing in the wings. He gave me a grim nod. I turned back to the crowd. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I simply walked to the podium where Julian had stood moments ago. I placed my hands on the wood. I leaned into the microphone. "My name is Alina Vance," I said, "and this board meeting is now in session." The room remained silent, terrified, obedient. I had my life back, but more importantly, I had my empire. And this time, no one was ever going to take it from me. I walked off the stage. My heels clicked a rhythm of victory. But as I reached the exit, a shadow detached itself from the wall, a man in a dark suit. He wasn't police. He wasn't press. He blocked my path. He held out an envelope. "Mrs. Vance," he said. His voice was low, gravelly. Julian didn't act alone. He had a financier. I stopped. My heart skipped a beat. I looked at the envelope. It was sealed with red wax. "Who?" I asked. The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Open it." I tore the envelope open. My fingers trembled slightly. Inside was a single photograph. I pulled it out. My breath hitched in my throat. The world tilted on its axis. The photo was of me, but it wasn't from the last 2 years. It was from yesterday, taken through the window of the safe house. And written on the back in elegant cursive were 3 words: "Welcome back, darling." I spun around to ask the man who sent this, but the hallway was empty. The celebration was over. The war had just begun. I'm Alina Vance, 30 years old, and I just watched the police drag my tormentors away from the balcony of the skyscraper I own. The mysterious photograph burned against my palm. "Welcome back, darling." I shoved the threatening note into my red silk clutch and snapped it shut. My fingers were trembling, not from fear, from the adrenaline crash. I couldn't deal with a shadow enemy right now, not when I had just decapitated the snake in plain sight. I turned away from the empty hallway where the messenger had vanished. Marcus was waiting for me by the elevators. His suit was rumpled. He looked exhausted, but he was smiling. "The press is going to eat the doors down, Alina," he said. "Let them," I replied. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. It was strong. It didn't sound like the woman who had spent 730 days begging for water in a locked room. "Where to?" Marcus asked. He pressed the call button. "Top floor," I said. "I want my office back." The elevator ride was silent. As the numbers climbed 30, 40, 50, I felt the pressure in my ears pop. It felt like surfacing from a deep, dark ocean. For 2 years, my world had been 10 feet by 10 feet. Gray walls, a barred window, a mattress that smelled like mildew. Now I was ascending to the heavens. The doors slid open with a soft ding. The reception area was dark. Julian had fired my assistant, Mrs. Higgins. I made a mental note to rehire her with a double salary in the morning. I walked across the marble floor. My heels clicked, echoing strikes against the stone. It was the sound of authority. I reached for the double oak doors at the end of the hall. My hand hovered over the brass handle. It was cold, solid. I pushed. The office was exactly as I remembered, and yet completely different. It smelled wrong. It smelled like sandalwood and expensive cologne. Julian's scent, he had changed the art. My husband's vintage maps were gone, replaced by cold, abstract modern pieces that looked like violent slashes of paint. My leather chair was gone, replaced by some ergonomic mesh monstrosity. Rage flared in my chest, hot and sudden. He had tried to erase us. He had tried to scrub every trace of the Vance legacy and replace it with his own hollow ego. I walked to the desk. I ran my finger along the edge. Dust. He wasn't even good at maintaining what he had stolen. I walked past the desk to the floor-to-ceiling glass doors. I unlocked the latch. The wind hit me instantly. It was a cool, crisp night air that tasted like exhaust and rain. It was the sweetest thing I had ever tasted. I stepped out onto the balcony. I gripped the railing. I looked down. 50 stories below, the street was a chaotic river of light. Red and blue strobes painted the asphalt. I squinted against the wind. I saw them, two tiny figures being shoved into the back of separate squad cars. From up here, Julian didn't look like a monster. He looked like an insect. I watched the doors slam shut. I watched the cars peel away, merging into the traffic of the city that was no longer his playground. "Goodbye, son," I whispered. The wind carried the words away. I didn't feel sadness. I checked my chest for grief, for a mother's guilt. There was nothing, just a hollow, quiet peace. I turned back into the room. I needed to wash the taste of him out of my mouth. I went to the hidden panel behind the bookshelf. My heart hammered a little. Had he found it? I pressed the hidden catch. The panel sprung open. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He hadn't found it. Julian was arrogant. He never looked beneath the surface. Sitting there, covered in a thin layer of dust, was a bottle of 1982 Chateau Margaux. My husband had bought it for our 10th anniversary. We never got to drink it. I grabbed a crystal glass from the shelf. I didn't bother to wipe the dust off the bottle. I popped the cork. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. I poured. The wine was dark, thick, almost black in the dim light. I took a sip. Velvet and oak. It warmed my throat, chasing away the phantom chill of the cell that still lingered in my bones. I walked over to the reflection in the glass door. I looked at the woman staring back at me. Her red dress was wrinkled. Her hair was a mess, wind-blown and wild. Her makeup was smudged, but her eyes, they were clear, they were sharp, they were dangerous. For 2 years, they had told me I was crazy. They had drugged me until I couldn't remember my own name. They had taken my freedom, my money, and my dignity. But they made a fatal mistake. They didn't take my life. I raised the glass to my reflection. "To the new management," I said to the empty room. I took another sip, letting the vintage wine settle my nerves. I thought about the note in my purse. "Welcome back, darling," the financier, the man behind Julian. The one who had paid for the drugs, the doctors, the fake death certificate. He thought a photo would scare me. He thought a threat would send me running back into the shadows. I laughed. It was a low, guttural sound. I wasn't the same woman who had been kidnapped 2 years ago. That woman was soft. That woman trusted people. That woman was dead. I am Alina Vance, and I have reclaimed every single brick of my throne. Let the financier come. I have plenty of wine and I'm just getting started.